I'm Phil Hellmuth Jr., and in this lesson we're going to talk about the goals of betting. As we've already mentioned, you want your bets to have a purpose, and you want your bets to tell a story that gets your opponents to act the way you want them to act. The question is, how do we accomplish this? Before we can reach our goal, we have to identify what it is. When it comes to betting, there are only a few specific outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We want our opponents to either fold, call, or raise. Let's say everyone has $1,500 in chips and the blinds are 15 and 30. We made a late position raise with the queen of spades, jack of clubs, queen jack offsuit, and got called by the big blind, bringing a flop of queen of hearts, jack of hearts, four of clubs. Top two, baby! Even though we hit top two pair here, this is still kind of a scary board, as our opponent could easily have a straight draw or a flush draw, and we'd like to end the hand right now. Yeah, by them moving all in. Which means we want them to fold, or do we? The first thing to determine is what kind of player we're facing. Is he loose or is he tight? Since a loose opponent is more likely to chase his draw than a tight opponent, we're going to have to bet more in order to give him the wrong odds to call. Because our opponent is only likely to hit his draw about 1/3 of the time, this means that betting about 1/2 of the pot should be enough to get a tight opponent to fold in this spot. Think about it. There's $200 in the pot. You bet half the pot. That's $100. Now for him to call, he's getting laid 3-1. You might be able to get rid of him because he's getting the exact perfect odds to call. A tight player might fold. A loose player might call. Against a loose opponent, though, this bet is probably too small, which means we may have to make a full pot bet or even overbet the pot in order to provoke a fold. In some cases where our stack is relatively short compared to the pot, overbetting may mean moving all in here. While this can be effective, be sure the reward of winning the hand is worth the risk of losing your stack before you make this play. Now, let's look at something a little bit trickier, which is enticing your opponent to call or raise your bet. Again, let's start the hand with 1,500 in chips and the blinds at 1,530. This time we've raised it from middle position with pocket eights and got called by the big blind who has ace-9. What a flop. Ace-8-3. How can we bet to get the most out of our opponent? We don't want to give away the strength of our hand here, which means we want to make our bet look weaker, our hand look weaker. There are a few ways we can do this. If we're acting first and our opponent isn't overly aggressive, we can make a relatively small bet, say half the pot, and hope that he calls. Assuming he doesn't raise, we can either bet again on the turn or check and hope he takes the bait, hope he takes the lead, thinking his ace is good. If he does raise in the flop, we should just call and reevaluate our action on the turn. Lord forbid that we re-raise him and make him fold his ace when he's drawing dead. Conversely, if our opponent is likely to lead out on his own, we can check our hand in the hopes that he bets for us. Depending on how strong we think his hand is, we can either just call his bet and see the turn, or put in a raise of our own in order to build the pot even more. If our opponent is first to act and checks to us, we can bet our hand and hope for a call. But maybe a smarter play is to not bet here and check behind him so that our opponent will feel more confident about betting his ace on the turn. I would probably bet, though. Finally, let's talk about defensive betting, where our goal is to entice either a call or a fold from our opponent while preventing them from leading out or raising our hand. Why bet defensively? Usually, we're making these kind of bets when we have a draw, but haven't yet made our hand. For example, let's say that we've loosened up and we've played 7-8 of spades in middle position. We get called by the button, and now we're looking at the king of spades, 10 of spades, 5 of clubs. We have nothing here but a flush draw. While checking here is okay, to me it's not the best way to play because we're giving up some potential value if we hit, while at the same time giving our opponent a chance to make a bet that would force us to fold our hand. Also, I would like to bet here because I feel like 60-70% of the time I'm just going to win the pot. The trick to betting defensively is to find a number big enough to provoke either a call or a fold from our opponent while keeping the bet cheap enough that it's not costing us too much to hit our draw. Oftentimes, a bet of around 1/3 the size of the pot is the right size to accomplish this goal.